What's up? It's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today I'm going to talk about Jesse Marsch, the American manager who's just been hired for Leeds. And this seems like a very good match for Jesse Marsch and Leeds. Jesse Marsch is a very pressing-oriented manager, and Leeds have been doing that for a long time under Marcelo Bielsa. So, in theory, this seems like a perfect match. However, Leeds are going through a relegation battle at the moment, and on top of that are in an injury crisis where they're missing their top striker Patrick Bamford, England starter and star player Kalvin Phillips, on top of Liam Cooper. This means the team is limited, and with their style of play continuing the pressing, the team just becomes more and more drained, which could lead to more injuries in a vicious cycle. So Jesse Marsch has been brought in and attempt to right the ship. But in terms of style of play, it's very hard to predict how Leeds will, or if they will, change. Marsch and Bielsa are very similar in style of play, and while certain things will definitely be tweaked, the general style of play might not. However, Leeds did fire Bielsa, who is a very accomplished manager, and brought in Jesse Marsch, so you'd expect something to be done differently. This is also a big test for Jesse Marsch, who for the first time is in a club where the talent of the club is not at the level of the league around him. While at New York Red Bull, MLS has a lot of parity, RB Salzburg, they were much better than the rest of the league, and RB Leipzig was a very talented team as well. So this is a big test for Marsch, as well as just being outside the Red Bull system for the first time. Or first time since he was with Montreal. So yeah, very, very challenging thing. So we have to see if he becomes a more defensive manager, which may be necessary for Leeds, if he will stay tactically consistent, and what the formation will be. Traditionally, he's been very flexible with his formation. There's a lot of versatility in the Leeds squad, so I'm not even going to try to predict what the formation will be. But it could be anything from back three, back four, two up top, maybe playing with 4-2-3-1. I'm not too sure, but he has remained tactically consistent with the pressing, and them changing that will be the big thing. So for Leeds, predicting how it'll go for him, it's tough to say because typically when a new manager comes in, they're able to get a pretty big bounce, usually able to turn things around pretty quickly, whether that's just being a motivated squad, honeymoon period, whatever you want to call it. They should be able to get a few points pretty quickly, and they have a game against Norwich coming up. That should be a win as well. So I think the expectation is before the international break and before Bamford and Phillips even come back. They should be back after the international break. Can't say for sure. But the expectation should be 6 points. With that new manager bounce, with an easy fixture, that should be the expectation. And they should be in very good shape if they're able to get those 6 points. But that's going to be a challenge. They're going to be up against a good Leicester squad, even though they have been underachieving. Aston Villa, that's a very good, tough match. Norwich, they should win, but they have had some decent moments as well. And a Wolves team that's very strong. It's going to be tough to get those 6 points, but I think that's what they have to do. Because it's going to be tough. Because if you look below Leeds, Watford just hired Roy Hodgson. He's been great at keeping teams up. As a Crystal Palace fan, I know very well. He cleaned up that Frank de Boer mess. That's going to be a very tough thing to do. And Sean Dyche, he knows how to keep teams up. That Burnley team has been in the Premier League for so long. And with new striker Vort Waghaus, who I talked about in the Ricardo Pepi to Wolfsburg video, that did not age well. And, Jay Rodriguez has been good for him. Dwight McNeil, we know how talented he is, and that defense has always been solid. Burnley's going to be getting up there. And the teams above them are going to be tough to hop. Newcastle seems like they've turned a corner and aren't even really going to be threatened by relegation. Brentford's been performing pretty well, and Everton might just be too good to go down. So if Leeds don't pick up these points quickly, they could be in the relegation zone by that time that international break hits. And if they are, they're going to be counting on Patrick Bamford to return from injury and hit form immediately. And for Kalvin Phillips to do the same. And I don't think that's a realistic position. So they really need to keep things. I'm talking about those 6 points before the international break. They need to hit that. I think they can, but if they don't, it'll be trouble. Team-wise, the team is decent even without their star players. Ian Mellier, he's a good young keeper. And what I mean by that is, talented player, I think he has a very high ceiling. But he's prone to mistakes. And that isn't the type of goalkeeper you'd like to have in a relegation battle. So, he's a good player, but it's not ideal. Then you have Struček at center back, another young player, another guy who I like his potential, but another guy who isn't the best for this moment. And Diego Llorente, the other center back, he has been pretty good. He has looked decent for them, but him alone, that's not enough to keep the defense strong. And at fullback, Junior Firpo hasn't been good enough since coming in. And Luke Ayling and Stuart Dallas, while very versatile, aren't necessarily strong players at that position. And then in the midfield, Klitsch, pretty solid. Stuart Dallas, good. Forshaw, Koch, Rodrigo, they're not bad, but it's not a great group. I'd compare it to Sheffield United last year, where the players, I wouldn't say that those guys were particularly bad players like Norwood, Fleck, especially Sander Berge. They're all pretty solid, but they're probably championship level players who had a good manager, bought into the system, and were able to play above their level. And now, without that manager, it's going to be tough to see how good they can be. Thankfully, unlike Sheffield United, Leeds have a very strong attack. Rafinha, Jack Harrison, Daniel James, even Joe Gilhart are all able to impact games. Rafinha, very good player. Jack Harrison, we've seen how dangerous he could be. Daniel James, a dynamic athlete whose end product has been coming along. And Joe Gilhart, very promising young player. But they don't have a true striker without Bamford being available. So while the attack is dangerous, it isn't necessarily lethal to other teams. So, very good players throughout the squad, and I like this team. I like this group, but I did with Sheffield United as well. So, I'd expect the team to remain largely the same. I wouldn't expect any dramatic changes. They can't even bring in players. And Jesse Marsch has a good group to work with, but he's going to have to get the best out of them. And that's a tough task, because I think Marcelo Bielsa has basically hit everybody playing at their best. So, how will things go? Well, it's tough to say. I think that they will be able to get those 6 points before the international break. And with that, I think 35 is probably the mark they need to hit to stay up. They're already at 23. I think they'd be able to get those next 6 points in the last few games. It's going to be tough, but I think that's very possible, and I expect them to stay up. But if things don't turn around quickly, it will get bad. And if it gets bad, Sean Dyche, Roy Hodgson, they know how to keep teams up. Everton, they are a very talented team. I don't expect them to drop to stay below that 35-point mark. And I wouldn't count on Brentford staying down either. So I think it'll be tough to avoid the bottom three if they don't get off to a really good start. But I think they will be able to get off to a really good start. And yeah, that's how I'm hoping things will go for Jesse Marsch. And should he last till the summer, man, he'll be able to reinforce this team. Everybody will get healthy again. Especially because there isn't any international things over the summer. Well, Nations League, but nothing big. So things will get better. So I'm thinking that Jesse Marsch will be able to keep Leeds up. I'm definitely going to be tuning into these games. He's a guy who I do want managing the national team moving forward, but this is a very big task. And if he isn't up to it right now, I'll say a lot about him. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to watch. That's all I'll talk about right now. See ya.